Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, one family's dangerous journey through the Darien Gap.
The jungle is not a route. It's something so ugly, not even the devil goes in there.
Every year, hundreds of thousands migrate through this stretch of jungle that connects North and South America. Many are children. What does the journey look like? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take.
I'm John Holman. I'm a correspondent with Al Jazeera. Based in Mexico City, my work takes me to different parts of Latin America.
Welcome back to The Take, John. It's good to have you. Back in January, you took a journey through a place called the Darien Gap with a group of about 700 other people for a film that you made for Al Jazeera's documentary program, Fault Lines. And you met a woman named Suani Flores and her family. They were traveling north from Ecuador. Tell me about them. What's their story and why were they headed to the U.S.?
So we met Suani and her family in the last camp before you go into the Darien Gap. They were about to go into the jungle.
My goal is to arrive in Arizona, where my dad is, and to be able to be together and start a new life.
So Suani's ex-boyfriend was a gang leader. She's 19, and when she broke it off, he took it really badly.
He killed my mom, and he was going to kill me, my daughters, and my brother. What we did was run for our lives.
And he dragged her into the woods, beat her up, told her he was going to kill her. Then he sent men to the house that she lived in with her mum and with her younger brother Victor, with her two little girls, 2 and 3 years old. And he shot Suani's mum in the head while the 2 little girls were in her lap. And then her brother Victor, who's 12, had to go into the room and say, "Please, don't kill me, don't kill my nieces." And they decided not to. Her uncle Eduardo lived in another city nearby, and Suani's dad, who'd already arrived in Arizona, said, "Please, help to get them out." So Eduardo, Suani's uncle, had a plan to try and get to the United States, and they weren't about to go, but they were all just like, "We've got to go right now."
Every day, we went out in the streets in Ecuador, scared. The whole country is taken over by crime. There are killings every day. I already had plans to leave. When the thing with Suani happened, I said, "No way. I can't go and leave them to get killed."
I can't even imagine that the grief and trauma and shock from seeing that killing up close and then knowing you're going to undertake this really arduous journey to flee. So let's talk about the journey. The Darien Gap is a 60-mile, 96-kilometer stretch of mountainous rainforest that makes up the only overland path between Panama and Colombia. It is swampy, as we see in the film. There's a scene from the first day of the hike where Suani and her uncle Eduardo are climbing a hill while she's holding a child.
Ya estamos arriba. Te cogiendo la soga. Quédate, cógete aquí.
And she almost gives up. But Eduardo pushes her to keep going, says she can do it for her kids.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. For your little daughters, you can.
This is happening in a place that is totally remote. There are no roads. Once you're in, there doesn't seem like there's a way out but through. So why then do people put themselves at such risk and go through the Darien Gap when there are other routes?
A lot of people coming from either South America and the Caribbean before, they hadn't needed to go through the Darien Gap because they've been able to fly into countries like Mexico, Guatemala, countries in Central America higher up the route. But what the United States in recent years has done has lent on those countries so that they won't give out visas so easily, or they'll have restrictions for people that are migrating in great numbers from South America or the Caribbean to the United States.
Mexico's National Guard deployed along its southern border to deter migrants from journeying to the U.S.
Guatemala is deploying security forces and demanding COVID tests from anyone wanting to cross.
And a byproduct of that strategy, organisations like Human Rights Watch were telling us, is that people then have to go through the Darien Gap. Before, perhaps they could have flown to a country higher up the route. Now they've got no choice.
We've been hearing about this treacherous journey through the Darien Gap for years now, but is there something new about who we're seeing? Because you are following a family with very young children, but there are other children on your journey as well that, Swani and her family were not unique.
So UNICEF, United Nations Children's Organization, told us that there's been a 7-fold increase in the number of children taking the route, and that what's been really disturbing for them is that 50% of the children are under 5.
Oh, wow.
Most children go into the route with their families, so it's not like they're going on their own until they're sort of late adolescence, teenage. The problem is the dangers that they're going to encounter. Just for example, we saw a Haitian family, strong guy, carrying a baby, and it was just a few months old, the baby. They're crossing a river, and Eduardo, the real guy holding together the Ecuadorian family that we were filming with, he saw them about to fall basically into this river with the baby strapped to the man's chest, and he came running in and helped them. And so you sort of imagine the cases where there's not an Eduardo there, and what the situation is then for people going through with children.
There's another moment of the film that really stuck out to me. People are crossing this deep, fast-moving river, and to get to the other side, it appears you have a choice.
There's a real cross point here because there's 3 different ways to go. By the water, but it gets to neck high in places. Up there where it's going to take 2 hours, so people aren't going to arrive in the next place to camp before dark, and up a really steep rock.
Can you talk about that moment for the people you were with and for you and your team?
Yeah, that moment was absolute panic on the ground.
It's really pretty dangerous. It's soaking wet. One slip, that could be it.
Because it was getting closer to sunset, and everyone knew that they had to get to like a sort of recognised camping point, because it's dangerous in the night in the Darien. There are gangs of bandits that come and assault and rape and rob you. So everyone knew they had to go on. The rock face looked slippery. The river was up to people's necks, and to go over the hill would have taken a long time. That's known as the most dangerous part, that gorge over that side. And I just remember like this little boy at the end of it, and he's just sitting on a rock. I guess his mum hadn't got over there yet, or was scoping out ahead. And he just looked completely shell-shocked. Like his eyes were, they're 100 miles away. And it's the look of complete immobilizing fright on a child's face. Mm-hmm. It struck all of us, But I remember I was on the edge of one of those big rocks, and there was a man carrying some, like a stick or something, and he just swung round without seeing me, and I almost went over. And I think that was the moment that it was brought home to me. No, it's that easy. Do you know what I mean? That's how so many people die.
So shortly before this crossing that you're talking about in the film, Swanee and her family realized that two of the kids that they were traveling with, her cousin, her uncle's son, Zaid, and her 3-year-old daughter, Deleza, who he was carrying on his back, are missing.
They got ahead of us, and we don't know anything about them.
I don't even know which path they took, and he's alone. A 13-year-old boy alone with a girl.
And they're hoping to find them at camp, but when they get to camp, they are still missing. How did this happen? How do people get separated?
This is really common. Families go in together, but children often come out on their own or don't. It's like when you're walking all day just anyway on a hike, if you can imagine, we'll get strung out, no? Because everyone's got a different pace. The 14-year-old and the 60-year-old are going to walk at different velocities. And it's really hard to tell the 14-year-old or in Said's case, 13-year-old, can you wait for Swanee, for example, who was bringing up the rear and was walking really, really slowly as a teenager. So he was carrying the lasso on his shoulders and they just got gradually further and further ahead. And it happened on the first day, but because there was an organised camping spot, they could just wait there. That was on the Colombian side, and I guess they got used to it. On the second day, when we're in the Panamanian side, it's not so organised. And so when the family got to the camping point, they were there.
We really have to move. We know the risks that exist. We know them completely, but we have no other choice. We are here, and most of all our children are there, and we have to go.
So what happened to Swanee's daughter and her cousin? That's after the break. So, John, we're going to come back to what happened to the children in a second, because going through this and then not knowing where your children are must be terrifying. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you about the journey for all of you. How do you know where to go? Are there marked signs? Are there helpers along the way? I know some people have guides if they can afford them. How does it work?
So at the start, you're on the Colombian side. You're just before the Darien Gap, and the people that are going through have to pay the Gulf Cartel, which is a major sort of Colombian cartel, one of the most powerful, and they control the route there. And once you've paid, it's really organised and also quite safe, paradoxically. There's sort of stairs cut into hillsides, there's ropes, there's porters with numbers on their back. If you can pay for them, it's all about money. There's food and water stops. There's a big organised camp spot right on top of a hill. It's pretty amazing. It's dirty, it's made of wood, but it's there. There's internet, there's barber shops. So on the Colombian side, it's completely organised. And that was the first day. But then you climb a bit on the second day and you cross a point that's on the summit of a hill. And you've got the Panamanian flag and the Colombian flag. Once you cross there and start going over the side of the hill, you're on your own. And you do feel that immediately you're in the wild. And the only thing that's showing you which way to go are blue bits of plastic that people have come on the route beforehand. Other migrants have put on trees to show the way to go. And that goes all the way down. The border police were shadowing us some of the way because we'd already told them we were going to go through. And they did that to make sure that the journalists on the route were safe. But obviously, normal people going through don't have that sort of protection.
Do you think that helped keep Swanee and her family safe because you were shadowing them?
The Panamanian border police shadowing us definitely helped. And I know that because when we got to Lajas Blancas, which is sort of the final camp up the river, we met a Doctors Without Borders doctor, and he was saying to us, "Hey, did anyone that you were with get raped?" And I was like, "Wow, no." And he said, "Because on the same day that you were traveling, we've had a lot of cases coming further up than you that have been raped."
Oh my gosh.
So it turned out that outside of our little bubble of relative safety that they obviously saw the border police sort of, wandering around not far from us. Other things were happening.
So speaking of that bubble, even with that relative safety, it doesn't mean that the families themselves will stay intact and free of danger. And so that brings us back to the kids who were separated from Swanee and the adults. They're missing at this point.
I don't know. We're going to go crazy. I don't know what we're going to do.
You finally make it all out of the Darien Gap. And then there is a moment of relief that your cameraman captures.
Rest assured that we could do this. Over there. We're going to find the baby and Said.
But at this point for the family, they haven't seen their children for more than 24 hours. Can you talk to me about that moment?
At the end of the Darien Gap, you go through some sort of fields and then you suddenly emerge out at this place. And we saw Eduardo and Swanee getting out and the relief was just washing off them. But they still knew that they hadn't found the children. Then you have to go up a river in these sort of little boats for hire to get to a place called Bajo Chiquito. And it was like the last chance that they get to meet up with the children because they knew that if the children had made it out, they'd be there. Said, the 13-year-old, Dalesa, the 3-year-old. And so they get there. They immediately make contact with the UNICEF and with the local NGO workers. I couldn't go in with them, but Rodrigo, our camera person, did.
I was afraid you'd get lost. I was afraid I would arrive and not find you here.
And I just saw the scenes, to be honest, when I was watching one of the final cuts of the documentary. And I mean, I guess you've seen it too. And it's just like almost destroys you, like the intensity of the emotion. And Eduardo was saying it like when he saw his son, he was like, I thought you were dead, They were there. Everything had turned out okay. That night, the family sort of sitting down on a table, like Eduardo, like they didn't have a lot of money, obviously, but it was like, tonight we're having like soda and we're having some chicken or whatever, and it was just a big celebration. Them just in this table, in this dirt yard, just looking really, really happy.
Of course, under the happiness, there's also what must be trauma. A 3-year-old being separated from her mother, not knowing if she's ever going to see her again. What did you learn about what kinds of impact this journey has on kids?
Yeah, so afterwards we went to see UNICEF in the camp at Lajas Blancas, and they were talking about the trauma that children come out with. I remember one of the things that stuck with me is like the fact that there's sometimes anger for children because they don't get to make that decision. Obviously, their parents make that most of the time with the best of intentions, no? But they didn't decide to go through that jungle. And so there can be anger, look at where you've taken me. And then there's all the other things, the extreme danger. Said was a key case of what you can see going through because when we interviewed him and we were like, well, what happened? He said, one, that he'd had to go like from tent to tent, begging for food for him and so that Dalesa could eat something. It's like a 13-year-old kid, and, ask for food for people that probably don't have a lot. I doubt that was easy. But then he was saying that they've been stopped by bandits.
We were going down a ravine and there were 4 armed people. A group of immigrants passed before us. A guy with a shotgun hit one in the head and broke his skull. They told me to show them my bag. They made me open it and stole my food. The most difficult moment was when there were 2 people dead in a tent, a man and a woman, but they weren't turned into bones. They still had flesh on them.
It's quite difficult to imagine, no? If we think of our 13-year-old selves experiencing that. And he was pretty matter-of-fact about it. I mean, at the end of when I was talking to Swanee, and she said that Dalesa just didn't want to leave her because she thought she was going to be just left in the jungle.
My daughter's traumatized. She tells me, "Mommy, don't leave me alone. Don't leave me alone, or I'm going to be alone in the jungle with Saeed." I tell her, "No, my daughter, I'm not going to leave you in the jungle."
So it took about 4 days for you all to finish the journey through the Darien Gap, but 2 more weeks for Swanee and her family to make it to their ultimate destination. What do we know about where she is now and how the family's doing?
So to be honest, it worked out for them, I guess, about as well as it could have done. They got to the border and basically went under the fence, sat there and waited for first the police and then Border Patrol to come. And so they've got that asylum process going on, but meanwhile, they're in Phoenix. At least for the time being, they're safe and they're pretty happy, to be honest.
And for you, what's your takeaway after doing this journey yourself?
I was just really relieved, to be honest, that we'd done it at the end. Mm-hmm. I felt that there was something that I needed to do to understand, I guess, the patch that I was covering and what people had gone through. Like a lot of the time in Mexico, I'm covering people just for a couple of hours. You talk to them for 10 minutes and then they're gone. And it's selfish to talk about it, but as a reporter, it destroys you. You feel terrible at the end of the day. And, none of this is about us, but it helped to spend 5, 6, 7 days with people going through. And we saw a lot of people in the camps afterwards, and it was, there was some sort of human experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. John, well, thank you for taking the trip, telling this story. Our thanks to Swanee and her family for allowing their story to be told, and thanks for doing the reporting.
Yeah, thanks to you, Malika.
And that's The Take. The film we've been discussing is the Al Jazeera Fault Lines documentary Children of the Darien Gap, produced by Mark Shalla and Luis Del Valle. Special thanks to Rodrigo Galdos and Nico Jones. A link to the film will be in the episode description. This episode was produced by Tamara Khandaker and Fahrinisa Campana, with Tabish, Talib, and me, Malika Bilal. It was edited by Alexandra Locke. The Take production team is Amy Walters, Ashish Malhotra, Catherine Nouhan, Chloe K. Lee, David Enders, Duha Mosaad, Khaled Soltan, Manahil Navid, Marcos Bartolomé, Noor Wazwaz, Sarí el-Khalili, Sonia Bhagat, Tabish Talib, Tamara Khandaker, and Zaina Badr. I'm your host, Malika Bilal. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Nay Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.